Amanda stepped out of her tiny living quarters, the soft glow of her personal lamp casting a warm hue across the cold metal floor. The air was stale, the smell of fear and despair heavy in the air. She glanced at her wrist, taking in the sleek, high-tech cuff that bound her to this life. A life of servitude, of being nothing more than a tool for the ruling class. But Amanda knew there was more to the cuff than just its physical restraints. It was a symbol of the chains that bound her people, a reminder of their oppression. Her eyes scanned the dimly lit hallway, the shadows playing tricks on her mind. The cuffs, she thought, they're everywhere. They're in the very fabric of our society, holding us down, keeping us from reaching our true potential. And yet, for every chain there is a link that can be broken. With a determined glint in her hazel eyes, Amanda stands with a posture that defies her circumstances. Her hair is a cascade of chestnut waves, often pulled back into a practical ponytail as she works. Her attire is simple yet functional, consisting of a fitted jumpsuit that allows for ease of movement. The cuff on her wrist is sleek and metallic, a stark contrast to her warm skin tone. She reached the community workshop, the familiar hum of machinery filling her ears. The walls were covered in blueprints and schematics, evidence of countless hours of planning and design. Her friends, her family, they all worked tirelessly to find a way to free themselves from the cuffs that bound them. They were her inspiration, her reason for fighting. Marcus entered the workshop, his expression conflicted. Amanda knew he was torn between his loyalty to the upper class and his growing sympathy for those who suffered beneath their rule. Marcus is tall with an athletic build, reflecting his inner conflict through his stoic demeanor. His eyes are a deep blue, thoughtful and observant, always watching and weighing his choices. His hair is short and neatly styled, indicative of his upper-class background. Despite his privileged status, he dresses modestly in an attempt to bridge the gap between the classes. "Amanda," he said softly, "I have news. The overseer has announced a new initiative. He plans to crack down even harder on those who defy the system." Her heart sank, but she refused to show fear. "We must be careful," she replied, her voice steady. "They will be watching us closely. But we cannot let them win." They fell silent, lost in their own thoughts. Out of the corner of her eye, Amanda saw movement. A shadow darting across the floor, disappearing into the darkness. Instinctively, she knew it was the overseer, his presence an ominous portent of the danger that lay ahead. Her heart raced, but she steeled herself. She would not back down. "Not now, not ever." "Amanda," Marcus whispered, "I am with you. Whatever happens, we will find a way to free our people. Together." Her eyes met his, and she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Yes, they would find a way. They had to. For the sake of their future, they would not be defeated. They worked in silence for what seemed like hours, their hands moving with a practiced efficiency as they worked on the latest prototype of their rebellion device. The cuffs, they knew, were not just a physical restraint. They were a symbol of the oppression they faced every day. And with each passing moment, their determination to destroy them grew stronger. The workshop door swung open, and the overseer stepped inside. The overseer's presence is intimidating, with a broad-shouldered frame that looms over the workers. His hair is a steely gray, cut short to maintain a no-nonsense appearance. His eyes are sharp and calculating, missing nothing. He wears a uniform that signifies his authority, adorned with symbols of power and control. His eyes raked over the room, searching for any sign of defiance. But Amanda and Marcus remained calm, their expressions neutral. They knew they were in grave danger, but they refused to show it. They were not animals to be cowed by fear. They were human beings with dreams and hopes, and they would not let him take those away from them. The overseer strode forward, his boots echoing through the empty space. "I've come to see how your little project is coming along," he sneered. "I must say, I am impressed by your audacity." Marcus and Amanda exchanged glances. They knew the game they were playing was dangerous, but they had no choice. They had to keep the upper hand, if only for a moment longer. "We are making good progress," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "We have made several improvements to our design." The overseer chuckled darkly. I am sure you have, he said, his gaze flicking briefly to the prototype resting innocently on a nearby workbench. But remember, the fate of your kind rests on your success. And failure is not an option. With that, he turned and left the workshop, his presence a cold reminder of the power he wielded and the danger they were in. As soon as the door clicked shut, Marcus and Amanda exchanged worried glances. They both knew that the overseer was growing more suspicious by the day, and it was only a matter of time before their secret was discovered. They needed to finish the device and begin their uprising as soon as possible, before it was too late. Determined not to let fear paralyze them, they redoubled their efforts, pouring every ounce of their energy into the final stages of the prototype's construction. The hours passed in a blur of sweat and steel as they worked tirelessly to give their people a chance at freedom. And with each passing moment, their hope grew stronger, their resolve more unshakable. As the last bolt was secured and the final weld completed, they stood back to admire their handiwork. The device was beautiful in its simplicity, yet deadly in its potential. It was their answer to the cuffs that bound them, their weapon against the oppression that had ruled their lives for far too long. They had done it. They had created something that could change the world. The only question that remained was when to strike. They knew that the moment they activated the device, their lives would be forever changed. They would be launching an all-out rebellion against the overseer and his army of enforcers. There would be no turning back, no surrender. They would have to be prepared for the fight of their lives. With a deep breath, Marcus and Amanda turned to face each other. In that moment, they knew they were not alone. They were part of something greater than themselves, a movement that would not be silenced, a force that could not be stopped. And together, they would finally break the chains that had held their people down for far too long. Their plan was simple, yet audacious. They would infiltrate the compound where the main control center for the cuffs was located, and they would disable it from the inside. It would be a suicide mission, to be sure, but they were prepared to give their lives for the greater good. They would either succeed, or they would die trying, but they would not go down without a fight. The night of their attack dawned dark and ominous, the sky above them a swirling mass of clouds that promised rain. They had spent weeks gathering supplies and weapons, training their small group of rebels in the art of combat and sabotage. Now, they were ready. They would strike at the heart of the overseer's power and show the world that freedom was still possible, even in the darkest of times. They crept through the shadows, their hearts pounding in their chests, their bodies tense with anticipation. The compound loomed before them, a fortress of steel and concrete that seemed impenetrable. But Marcus and Amanda knew better. They had spent countless hours planning their attack, and they were ready to put those plans into action. The guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements slow and lazy, their minds on other things. Marcus and Amanda exchanged a final nod, and then they sprang into action. They dashed across the open ground, weaving through the sparse foliage, their every move calculated and precise. They were like ghosts, silent and deadly, their every footstep muffled by the night itself. The main entrance loomed before them, a massive set of double doors that guarded the inner sanctum. Marcus and Amanda exchanged one last look before they split up, Marcus heading for the door while Amanda circled around to the rear. They had practiced this part 100 times, and they knew they had to move fast. If they were caught now, it would all be for nothing. Marcus reached the doors and paused for a moment, his heart racing in his chest. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, the pressure of every pair of eyes that watched him from the shadows. But he pushed those fears aside and focused on the task at hand. He placed the explosive charge at the base of the door, connecting it to a small detonator in his hand. With a deep breath, he counted down from 3 and then pressed the button. The explosion rocked the compound, the blast wave sending shards of metal and glass flying through the air. Marcus dashed through the doorway, his weapon at the ready, his senses on high alert. He knew that the next few moments would be crucial. If they didn't disable the control center now, their entire plan would fail. Amanda appeared at his side, her face streaked with dust and sweat, her eyes blazing with determination. Together, they raced down a long corridor, their boots thundering against the concrete floor. They could hear the alarms blaring, the guards scrambling to respond to the attack. But they did not falter. They were too close now to fail. They reached the control center, a massive room filled with banks of blinking lights and rows of computer terminals. Marcus and Amanda exchanged one last look before they split up once again, each taking a side of the room. They knew they only had seconds to disable the control center before the rest of the guards arrived. As Marcus worked furiously to sabotage the mainframe, Amanda slipped silently from terminal to terminal, planting explosives and disabling key components. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning electronics, and the sound of explosions echoed through the room. But they pressed on, their movements fluid and precise, their focus unwavering. With a final burst of energy, Marcus threw himself at the main control panel, tearing it from the wall and smashing it to the ground. The lights flickered and died, the alarms falling silent one by one. Amanda finished her work at the same time, and they met in the center of the room, their hands clasped tightly together. They had done it. They had destroyed the control center, and with it, the Overseer's power. The cuffs were no more. The people were free. But they knew that their fight was far from over. The Overseer would not go down without a fight, and there would be many more battles to come. Still, for this moment, they could savor the victory, the knowledge that they had struck a blow against tyranny. They embraced each other, their hearts full of hope and determination. As they stood there, the sounds of chaos echoed through the compound, the shouts of rebels and the clash of weapons. They could hear the Overseer's forces rallying, trying desperately to regain control. But Marcus and Amanda knew that they had given their people a chance, and that was all that mattered. They made their way through the compound, the smell of smoke and ash filling their nostrils, the sight of destruction and devastation all around them. They encountered resistance at every turn, but their courage and leadership inspired those who fought alongside them. They were no longer two individuals, but symbols of hope, of freedom. The battle raged on for hours, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting the world in shadows. But Marcus and Amanda fought on, their determination unwavering. They were determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. As the last vestiges of daylight faded away, they stood atop a pile of rubble, surveying the carnage around them. The Overseer's forces had been routed, his stronghold reduced to rubble. The people cheered their names, their voices ringing out across the compound. Marcus and Amanda looked at each other, the weight of the world still heavy on their shoulders, but with a newfound strength and resilience. They knew that their fight was far from over, but they also knew that they had taken the first step on a long and difficult journey. Together, they would rebuild their world, and they would never again know the chains of oppression. As they stood amidst the celebration, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. It was a rebel fighter he had met only days ago, before the attack. The man had lost family in the fighting, but he looked at Marcus and Amanda now with a newfound hope in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice breaking. "Thank you for giving us our freedom back." Amanda wiped a tear from her eye, her hand clasped tightly around the man's shoulder. "It was not us who did this," she said softly. "It was all of you. You are the true heroes here. You are the ones who fought and bled and sacrificed for this day. We are just two people who chose to stand with you." The man's face lit up at her words, and he pulled her into a hug. As Marcus watched them, he felt a sense of pride swell within him. It was not about him or Amanda, he realized. It was about the people they had fought beside, the countless individuals who had come together to make their world a better place. And as the celebration continued into the night, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning of a new era, one where freedom and justice would reign supreme. Their work was far from over, of course. The Overseer was still out there, and there were countless other tyrants across the world waiting to take his place. But for now, they had made a difference. They had given hope to the hopeless and shown that change was possible. As the fires died down and the people began to disperse, Marcus and Amanda found themselves standing together once more, gazing out at the vast expanse of the compound. The stars twinkled overhead, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and charred wood. It was a bittersweet moment, one filled with both joy and sorrow, but also with an unshakable sense of determination. They knew that their fight would continue, that they would face many more challenges and heartaches along the way. But they also knew that they would face them together, as allies and comrades in arms. Because in the end, it wasn't about Marcus or Amanda. It was about the people and the world they lived in. It was about ensuring that freedom and justice prevailed, no matter the cost. As they stood there, hand in hand, they made a silent pledge to each other. They would not rest until every person on this planet lived in a world where chains and oppression were but distant memories, where dreams could be pursued and hopes could be realized. And as long as they had each other, they knew that they could face anything. The stars seemed to twinkle brighter, and a gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the distant sounds of laughter and celebration. It was a beautiful night, Marcus thought, but it was also the beginning of something even more beautiful. Something truly extraordinary. And he knew, deep in his heart, that they had played a part in making it happen. They had faced death and danger at every turn, led their people through the darkest of times, and emerged victorious. Marcus and Amanda, once ordinary citizens, had become symbols of hope and freedom, beacons of light in a world that had grown all too accustomed to darkness. They had become legends in their own time, and their names would echo through the annals of history for generations to come. But for now, they could only bask in the afterglow of their triumph. They stood together on the crest of a hill, overlooking the vast expanse of the newly liberated compound. The fires had burned low, leaving only embers glowing softly in the night. The sounds of revelry had faded into the distance, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional hushed conversation. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Amanda asked softly, her voice barely audible above the rustle of the wind. Marcus turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "I've been asking myself that question every day since we first started this journey," he admitted. "But I think we must focus on the present and on making sure that what we've fought for today doesn't slip away tomorrow. We must rebuild, and we must make sure that the chains of oppression never bind our people again." Amanda nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And what of the overseer? We cannot allow him to continue to terrorize other parts of the world." Marcus took a deep breath, his shoulders squaring. "We will find him, Amanda. We will hunt him down and bring him to justice. And we will free the world from his tyranny, once and for all." They stood together in silence for a moment, lost in their own thoughts, before Marcus reached out and took Amanda's hand in his. "We will need allies if we are to succeed," he said finally. "We must reach out to other rebellions, other groups who share our vision of a free and just world. Together, we can be unstoppable." Amanda nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "And what of the people we leave behind? Those who are too afraid to join us or too loyal to the overseer to see the truth?" Marcus sighed heavily, his expression solemn. "We can only do what we can, Amanda. We must continue to show them the error of their ways, to offer them hope and a better future. But in the end, it is their choice to make." As they stood there, lost in their conversation, the stars overhead seemed to shift and dance, as if they were moving in concert with the whispers of the wind. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and the lingering memory of battle, but it was a smell that now carried with it a newfound sense of purpose and determination. Their army had grown by leaps and bounds since they had first started this journey, swelling with men and women from all walks of life, united in their hatred of the overseer and their love for freedom. They were no longer just Marcus and Amanda, but a force to be reckoned with, a beacon of hope for those who had been living in darkness for far too long. As the night wore on, the sounds of revelry slowly began to fade, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of whispered conversations. The fires that had once raged through the compound now burned low, their dancing flames casting long, flickering shadows across the ground. Marcus and Amanda found themselves drawn to a secluded clearing where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. They sat down on a nearby log, the rough bark digging into their legs, but they paid it no mind. Instead, they stared into each other's eyes, their hearts racing and their minds spinning with plans and strategies. "We could send out emissaries," Amanda suggested, her eyes shining with determination. People who have seen the truth about the overseer's reign, who can testify to the atrocities and show others the way to freedom. They could travel to other parts of the world, meeting with other rebellious groups, and help to unite us all under a common banner. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. That is a good idea, Amanda. But we must also be prepared for the overseer's counterattack. He will not give up easily, and he will stop at nothing to crush us. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts, before Amanda spoke again. We need a place where we can train our soldiers, where we can prepare for the battles to come. A place where we can coordinate our efforts and plan our strategy. Marcus's eyes lit up at the idea. You're right. We should find a hidden stronghold, a place where we can train in secret and prepare for the day when we must strike the final blow against the overseer. As they continued to discuss their plans, the stars overhead seemed to dance, as if they were mirroring the eagerness and determination in Marcus and Amanda's hearts. The sounds of the nighttime forest faded into the background, replaced by the soft murmur of their voices, whispering of a future filled with hope and freedom. Around them, the other members of their army slept fitfully, dreaming of the battles they had fought and the ones yet to come. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and the cool night breeze, but beneath it all was a new, unmistakable scent, the smell of liberation. As the hours wore on, the first glimmers of dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of pink and orange, bathing the world in a newfound light. Marcus and Amanda sat there, hands clasped tightly together, watching as the world around them slowly awoke from the nightmare of tyranny. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. Behind them, their army stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of determined faces bathed in the warmth of the rising sun. Men and women of all ages and walks of life, united by their shared desire for freedom and their unwavering faith in Marcus and Amanda's leadership. They were no longer just two people, they were a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, Marcus and Amanda stood up, their shoulders squared and their chins lifted defiantly. They raised their voices in a clear, united cry, their words carrying across the camp like a battle cry. "Forward, my friends!" Marcus shouted, his voice strong and steady. "Together, we will reclaim our world from the shackles of tyranny. Together, we will be free." The words echoed through the camp, stirring the soldiers from their slumber. One by one, they rose to their feet, joining their voices with Marcus and Amanda's in a thunderous chant. As the sound of their united voices filled the air, it seemed as if the very earth itself shook with their determination. Amanda looked out over the sea of faces, her heart swelling with pride and love. She could see the fear and doubt in some of their eyes, but she knew that those fears were nothing compared to the strength and resilience of the men and women who had chosen to stand by her side. She took Marcus's hand, squeezing it gently, and together they led their army forward, toward the next challenge, the next battle, the next victory in their long and arduous quest for freedom. The days that followed were filled with intense training and strategizing. They had to move their army through the forest quickly and quietly, avoiding detection by the overseer's forces. Marcus and Amanda worked tirelessly, teaching their soldiers how to use the weapons they had scavenged from the ruins of the old world, how to move stealthily through the trees, and how to fight as one united force. They also spent countless hours poring over ancient maps, trying to discern the location of the hidden stronghold where they could make their final stand. Finally, after weeks of travel and countless near misses with the overseer's patrols, they reached their destination. It was a long-forgotten monastery, hidden high in the mountains, where the monks had once trained in the ways of peace and meditation. Now, it would be transformed into a fortress, a last bastion of hope against the overseer's tyranny. Their first order of business was to fortify the monastery, repairing the crumbling walls and barricading the windows. They set up makeshift workshops where blacksmiths could forge weapons and armor, and where healers could tend to the wounded. The sounds of hammering metal and sawing wood echoed through the halls, mingling with the whispered prayers of the monks who had chosen to remain and fight beside them. As they worked, they received word that the overseer's army was drawing near. Marcus and Amanda called a meeting of their most trusted advisors, and together they huddled over a map, planning their final assault. They knew that they were vastly outnumbered and that the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that they were fighting for something far greater than mere survival. They were fighting for the freedom of an entire world, and they would not surrender that fight without a struggle. In the midst of their planning, they were interrupted by a young messenger, breathless from his long run through the forest. He bore news that the Overseer's army had set up camp just beyond the next ridge, preparing for the final assault on the monastery. Marcus and Amanda exchanged grim glances, but they did not let the news shake their resolve. Instead, they redoubled their efforts, preparing their troops for the battle that was sure to come. The night before the battle, Marcus and Amanda stood before their army, addressing them for the last time. They spoke of courage and sacrifice, of the need to fight not for themselves, but for the countless innocents who had been enslaved by the Overseer's tyranny. They reminded them of the countless lives that hung in the balance, and of the duty they had all taken upon themselves when they had chosen to stand with Marcus and Amanda. Their words were met with thunderous applause and cries of determination, as the soldiers of the monastery army pledged their lives to the cause. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they began their final march, silently creeping through the darkness toward the enemy camp. In the pre-dawn light, they emerged from the trees, weapons raised in unison. The Overseer's army, caught unawares, scrambled to form a defensive line. For a moment, everything seemed to fall silent, as if the world held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Then, like the snap of a whip, the battle began. Swords clashed, arrows whistled through the air, and the ground shook with the impact of heavy blows. The battle raged for hours, with neither side giving an inch. Marcus and Amanda fought with a fury born of desperation, their skill and leadership rallying their troops to greater heights. The monks, their martial training honed by countless hours of meditation and prayer, moved through the chaos like ghosts, striking down the Overseer's soldiers with precision and grace. The Overseer himself, mounted on a massive war horse, charged again and again into the fray, seeking to crush the resistance single-handedly. As the sun began to rise, casting its golden light across the battlefield, it became clear that the tide of the fight had turned. The Overseer's army was beginning to crumble under the relentless onslaught, and the survivors were starting to flee in panic. Marcus and Amanda, seeing their enemy's inevitable defeat, rallied their remaining forces, pressing the attack with renewed vigor. Finally, with a great shout of triumph, they burst through the Overseer's lines, surrounding him on all sides. The Overseer, trapped and cornered, raised his sword in defiance, but Marcus and Amanda knew that he could not win. They did not want his death, however. They wanted him to see the folly of his ways, to understand the true cost of his tyranny. So, instead of striking the final blow themselves, they ordered their soldiers to stand down. The Overseer, his armor dented and bloodied, his horse lathered with sweat, slowly lowered his sword. His eyes darted around the circle of armed men, his expression one of disbelief and confusion. Marcus and Amanda walked forward, their steps slow and deliberate, until they stood before him. The air was heavy with the stench of blood and smoke, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. "You have suffered a great defeat," Marcus began, his voice steady and calm. "But it does not have to be the end. You can choose a different path from here. You can choose to leave this life of violence and tyranny behind and join us in building a better future for all of us." The Overseer's lip curled in a sneer. "You expect me to believe that you would show mercy to a man who has fought so hard against you?" he asked, his voice laced with derision. "You are fools, both of you." Amanda stepped forward, her eyes filled with compassion. "Perhaps we are fools, my lord," she said, using the title that had once been his due. "But we believe in something greater than ourselves. We believe in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption." The Overseer scoffed, but something in Amanda's words seemed to reach him. He looked away, his gaze falling on the ground. "What you ask," he said, his voice barely audible, "it is not so easy." "We know it is not," Marcus replied, his voice gentle. "But it is the only path forward. A path of peace and cooperation." You have the chance to make amends for the suffering you have caused, and to help us build a world where such atrocities can never happen again." The overseer hesitated, his expression conflicted. Slowly, he raised his head, meeting Marcus's gaze. "Very well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will consider your offer." As the defeated army looked on in surprise, Marcus and Amanda exchanged a triumphant glance. They had planted a seed of hope, and though it was small and fragile now, they knew it would grow. They turned their attention back to the overseer, who still sat atop his horse, looking as if he were trying to decide whether to trust them or not. Over the next few months, the people began to heal. The survivors built new homes, tended to their wounded, and mourned their dead. Marcus and Amanda worked tirelessly to bring order to the chaos, setting up a new government based on justice and fairness. They traveled throughout the land, spreading word of their victory and their vision for a united, peaceful future. One day, a lone rider approached their village, his horse weary and his armor worn. It was the overseer, come to make his decision. Marcus and Amanda, upon seeing him, exchanged nervous glances. They had given him time and trusted in his ability to choose the right path. Now, they would have to wait and see if their gamble had paid off. The overseer dismounted, his knees wobbling from exhaustion and the weight of the decision he carried. He approached Marcus and Amanda, his head bowed in submission, before he slumped down onto his knees. "I have come to offer my allegiance to you," he said, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "I can no longer bear the weight of the suffering I have caused, and I wish to make amends." Marcus and Amanda exchanged another glance, this time filled with relief and hope. They reached out to take the overseer's hands, pulling him upright. "Your wisdom and experience will be invaluable to us," Marcus said, his voice steady and strong. "Together, we will build a better future for all of us." Amanda placed a hand on the overseer's shoulder. "You have taken the first step on a long and difficult path," she said, her voice gentle. "But know that you are not alone. We will journey with you, and we will not forget the lessons you have learned." The overseer looked up, meeting their eyes with a newfound determination. "I am ready to serve," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "Let us begin." Together, they set about the task of rebuilding the village, repairing the damage that had been done during the war. They worked side by side, sharing ideas and experiences, and their people followed suit, drawn to their leaders' shared vision of a brighter future. As the weeks turned into months, progress was slow but steady. New homes were built, crops were planted, and trade routes were reestablished. The people of the village began to smile again, to laugh and sing as they worked. Marcus and Amanda, guided by the overseer's wisdom and experience, made decisions that benefited all, ensuring that the lessons of the past were not forgotten. One day, a traveler arrived at the village gates, bearing news from the outside world. The other kingdoms, once embroiled in conflict, had also found peace. They had come together to form a grand alliance, united by the shared goal of prosperity and cooperation. Marcus, Amanda, and the overseer, inspired by this news, set their sights even higher. They began to dream of a day when their village would be but one among many, all working together towards a brighter future for all. The years passed, and the village continued to thrive. Marcus and Amanda's children grew up, learning the value of hard work, compassion, and understanding. The overseer, now an elder statesman, watched over them all with a proud smile, his once blood-stained hands now calloused from a lifetime of honest labor. As they gathered around the great hearth on a crisp autumn evening, swapping stories and laughter, they knew that they had built something truly special, something that would endure for generations to come. And so it was that the once broken kingdom found its way back to peace and prosperity, thanks to the courage, wisdom, and unyielding determination of three unlikely heroes, a commoner, a nobleman, and a man who had once been their enemy. Their tale would be sung for years to come, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring strength of righteousness. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it.